Morning. Thank you for coming. Joseph Godshaw, and I'm the Director of International Affairs for the Associated Students of Colorado State University. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's Disagree Better panel discussion between Governor Jared Polis and Governor Spencer Cox, hosted by Colorado State University President Amy Parsons. And acknowledgement is one that in history, and it is with great humility and honor that I share these with you. Homelands, Cheyenne, and Ute nations and people. This was also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for numerous other native tribes. We recognize the indigenous peoples as original stewards of this land and all the relatives within it. As these words of acknowledgement are spoken and heard, the ties nations have to their traditional homelands are renewed and reaffirmed. CSU is founded as a land-grant institution, and we accept that our mission must encompass access to education and inclusion, and, significantly, that our founding came at a dire cost to Native nations and peoples whose land this university was built upon. This acknowledgement is the education and inclusion we must practice in recognizing our institutional history, responsibility, and commitment. And now I'd like to welcome our partners from Colorado Politics. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here. It's a privilege to be introducing this program today. I want to thank Colorado State University for partnering with us to make this event happen. If you are a student of Colorado State University, can you raise your hand? That's wonderful. All of you are getting a first-class education, and you should all be very proud. My name is Luigi Del Puerto. I'm the editor of the Denver Gazette and Colorado Politics. Let me tell you a really short story about my native country, my home country, the Philippines. So back in 2009, there was a governor there who wanted his son to succeed him. There was also a rival politician who wanted to become governor. Now, this rival politician had received death threats. And you see, in this part of the country, there's a bit of risk involved if you decide to run for a public office. And so he decided that he was going to send his wife and his sisters to go file the paperwork so that he could run for governor. And in this part of the country, there's a very strong tradition against harming women. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just letting you know what the culture is. And so he decided that he was going to send his wife and his sisters, that they would be safe. It was a big political event. It was a big news event, and they invited journalists. And so dozens of journalists accompanied the wife and the sisters to go to the election office so they could file these papers for his candidacy. Well, they never got there. They were stopped in the middle of the highway by armed men. Their vehicles were commandeered. They were brought to the stronghold of the incumbent governor. The women were abused. They were all massacred. 58 people died that day. 32 of them journalists. It was the deadliest attack on members of my profession in world history. You see, this is what happens when democratic institutions are so weak that they cannot contain our worst impulses. This is the logical extension when a society fails to disagree better, which brings me to our event this morning. And the fact that we are having this conversation, the fact that we can hold it here, renews my faith in our grand experiment in American democracy. And that is something we all should be proud of. Our democratic institutions are stronger than in many parts of the world. But make no mistake about it, democracy is fragile. And it is only as strong as you are willing to fight for it. So this, what we're having today, cherish it and don't take it for granted. Okay, on to our panel this morning. We have a great show. Joining us this morning is Governor Jared Polis, the governor of our state. Governor Polis is an entrepreneur, education leader, and dedicated public servant. And prior to becoming governor, he launched several successful companies, founded schools for at-risk students and new immigrants, served on the State Board of Education, and represented Colorado's 2nd Congressional District for many, many years. He was first elected as governor in 2018 and was re-elected just last year by nearly 20 points. That's a landslide, by the way. As governor, he is focused on growing the economy, preschool education, healthcare, energy, property tax relief, among many causes. He also serves as vice chair of the National Governors Association. Let's give him a round of applause. Also joining us this morning is Governor Spencer J. Cox. He is a husband, father, farmer, recovering attorney, and Utah's 18th governor. Prior to becoming governor, he served as a council member, mayor, county commissioner, and state legislator, and he was appointed as Utah's lieutenant governor back in 2013. He was sworn in as governor in 2021, and in his previous life as an attorney, he clerked for U.S. District Judge Ted Stewart, and worked at a Salt Lake City law firm. As governor, Governor Cox focuses on taxes, water and infrastructure, education, school choice, housing, suicide prevention, and mental health. And Governor Cox also serves as the chair of the National Governors Association. Let's give him a round of applause, please. Moderating our panel this morning is President Amy Parsons. President Parsons is the 16th president of Colorado State University. Prior to being named president, she served in various senior executive leadership roles at CSU and CSU System, including as vice chancellor of the CSU System, vice president for university operations at CSU, deputy general counsel, associate legal counsel at CSU Fort Collins. She has 17 years of experience of combined higher education and private sector experience. And President Parsons holds a bachelor's degree in political science from CSU and a Juris Doctorate from the University of Colorado. As vice president of operations at CSU, she helped navigate through the fiscal challenges of the Great Recession, supported the first comprehensive salary equity survey, and oversaw a historic physical transformation that included construction and renovation of state-of-the-art classroom buildings, parking structures, research facilities, and an on-campus stadium. And previously, she served or worked as a litigation attorney. Let me leave you with this before I hand it over to President Parsons. There is one way you can do right now to help strengthen our democracy, and it only costs $199 a year. If you're not yet a subscriber to Colorado Politics, please go ahead, let me know. I will get you squared away. Have a wonderful day and enjoy the show.
Luigi, do you guys have a student rate to subscribe for less? That you got? Good, good. How much is that one? Okay, figure it out. $19.95 for students. Okay.
Man, if that's all it takes to save our democracy, I'm in.
Yeah.
So.
I will take your money.
Well, good morning, and thanks to Colorado Politics National Governors Association and, of course, the esteemed governors for being with us this morning and helping us to understand how to disagree better. CSU is a student-centered top-tier research university. We are also a public land-grant university, which means that we are dedicated to the revolutionary idea of the democratization of education. And in this year, we're embarking on a special thematic year of democracy, bringing in democracy to all that we do in our classrooms, even in our art galleries, in our theater productions, and all across campus focused on voter registration and student participation. So today, as part of this initiative, we're happy to host all of our in-person guests and our online guests. I'll be asking their questions to you over the course of the next hour. So we'll go ahead and get started. I will start by asking each of the governors one question about why being able to disagree better is a critical skill. And then we'll move on to a series of discussion questions, some submitted by our audience that I have here and some submitted by our students. You ready?
Perfect.
Okay. So let's start with Governor Cox. Welcome
Thank
to
you.
Colorado State University.
Great to be here in
We're
Colorado.
so happy to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for the great weather too. You nailed it.
You're
Perfect.
welcome.
Just like Utah, right?
Yeah, it's just perfect. Yeah.
It's always like
It's
always like
second
this
best
here.
skiing in the country, right
Oh,
there.
no,
Sure,
no,
so, you
no.
know.
Yeah, I thought we were going to disagree better. Those are fighting words.
Just straight up disagreeing, it turns out. Governor Cox, why do you think this conversation about how to disagree better is so important, especially right now?
Look, I don't think it's ever been more important for the reasons that Luigi mentioned. We've talked to experts across the country, and they will tell you that right now, however bad you think it is, it's worse. Our democratic institutions are failing, and we are really. I mean, we're seeing an increase in political violence here. You mentioned what happened in the Philippines. Just all you have to do is look at the news yesterday, see what's happening in Congress, so we are passing all of the checkpoints towards catastrophic failure of our democratic institutions because of this deep polarization that we're seeing. And so I love our country. I care deeply about our country, and I think this is not just the issue of the year. I think it's the issue of our generation. It is the single most important issue in our country today. Can we solve problems without hating each other? And right now, too many people are saying no.
Governor Polis.
We'll have more positive things in a minute. So.
Governor Polis, was there an instant in your career or your life when you realized the wisdom of this approach of disagreeing better?
Yeah, and I would add that disagreeing better doesn't mean don't disagree. People have different values, different faiths, different political opinions. That's what makes our democracy in our country so wonderful. If we all agreed, I don't know what kind of place we could be, but it's how do you handle that disagreement? How do you let it lead to a better outcome? How do you form common cause? I think part of that is, of course, making sure that you don't see party as the key part of your social identity. So when I was elected governor 5 years ago, one of the things I ran on was universal preschool and kindergarten. There had been a Republican legislator toiling away at trying to get full-day kindergarten for years, Jim Wilson of Salida. And my first call after the election was to a Republican legislator saying, let's figure out full-day kindergarten. And guess what? We did. It's rare for a minority member of a legislative body to be the key sponsor of the governor's agenda item. And he was, and it wasn't easy. Like anything, there was opposition from some Republicans and some Democrats who basically wanted money for other things. But we were able to get universal full-day kindergarten done that first year.
Very cool.
That's amazing. Well, yep. Well, I'm very excited about this conversation. I have some questions here created from our audience members. So, Governor Polis, we'll start with you. Sort of follows up on what you just said. What's your advice for people, and maybe specifically students, coming into this election cycle, which is certainly to be contentious across the country, but definitely on our campus, how to handle potentially contentious conversations? The question is, do you think people should play nice and avoid topics that they know will be unpleasant?
So no, I mean, the answer is no. You don't tune out just because you think that the public sphere is completely dominated by vitriolic people on sides attacking one another's character. I mean, and that's part of the danger, right? It's not just the danger of the vitriolic rhetoric, it's the danger that the rest of us tune out because it seems so unpleasant and so derogatory. And that's in many ways the worst thing that could happen for civil society and democracy. So tune in and help be part of making that dialogue and discussion work. Being respectful of those you disagree with, asking questions, engaging in authentic dialogue, not being afraid to talk about values and opinions with people in a constructive way that doesn't denigrate the character of anybody that you're in a conversation with.
Mm-hmm. Governor Cox, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, everything he just said. We talk about toxic polarization and unhealthy disagreement, right? And there, as I mentioned to some of the students today, there are two sides to that coin. One is screaming at each other. That's unhealthy conflict for sure. But not engaging at all is just as unhealthy for our democracy. And so the answer has to be no. I encourage people always to be curious. There's a magic question that I use. I share it often. It's tell me more about why you feel that way. That question, it does two things. One, it calms me down because my first instinct is to fight. And by the way, no one has ever changed their mind by attacking them. Never happens. We always think this time it'll work. If I just tell them how stupid they are, this time they'll change their mind. It never, ever, ever works. So being curious and saying, tell me more about why you feel that way. Sometimes I have to ask it 2 or 3 times to calm me down, but it also shows I'm interested in the other person. And what you find is if you ask it enough and get them to the why, you'll find you have something in common with them, because almost always it comes down to them loving their country, their family, their community, something. And then it also then gives you a chance, because you listen to them, to explain yourself in a positive and constructive way. And it works. I'm telling you, it absolutely works. I've seen it in the most almost near violent situations where people are just so angry that just by asking that question, we can calm down and listen and learn from each other.
So, Governor Cox, I think you just answered the next audience question in
Awesome.
a
I
way,
love
which
doing
is
that.
what practical tools or advice would you give people who are anxious about going into a setting where they anticipate that they're going to have disagreements?
Yeah, look, so that's the first part. The second part is what Governor Polis said, and that is, do not give up on your principles. Like when we launched this Disagree Better initiative, some of the criticism we got is, oh, you just want us to go along to get along, right? It's not it at all. You do not have to give up on your principles at all. And you shouldn't. But I will, the other thing I think is really important is humility. Our founders talked about this a lot. I mean, you go back and look, some of my favorite quotes from the founders, George Washington talked about it, James Madison talked about it, John Adams talked about it, the need for humility in political discourse. I always say, if you can walk into a situation, a hostile situation, and say to yourself, okay, just not the probability that I'm wrong, but the possibility that I might be wrong, you're going to have a far better conversation. And again, that will show to the other person. That gives the other person permission to think they might be wrong as well. And the other very practical thing is never watch cable news again. Yeah, my wife and I just celebrated 11 years of not watching cable news, and it's our marriage is better, our family's better. People laugh when I say that. I'm telling you, it's true. Our lives are better. They're happier, healthier because we stopped watching cable news. So.
Talk about excellent practical advice there. Governor Polis, practical advice from your standpoint.
Yeah, engage with others and bridge that divide. We have a holiday coming up, Thanksgiving, a national day of gratitude, and I think around most extended family dinner tables, there's people of all different political persuasions, and it's a good opportunity to be curious, ask questions, be civil. I think too often we treat politics as something that can't be discussed without toxicity. That's kind of giving up on what it means to be a republic and have these discussions. So obviously that might be better than breaking out into a brawl, but those are not the only two items on the menu. There's absolutely constructive ways to engage in disagreeing better and civil dialogue around issues that matter. And at the very least, you might have a little bit more of an understanding about why somebody feels that way, and they might have a better understanding about why you feel the way you do.
Let's move on to a couple of specific examples. Governor Polis, what are examples of success in Colorado or with your fellow governors where you've seen opposite sides disagree better on an issue and be able to move the country forward?
Well, I think that as a general rule, this works better at the state level than it does at the national level. It does in Colorado, it does in Utah. Not every state, not every governor necessarily all the time, but certainly there's strong buy-in among the governors for Governor Cox's initiative about Disagree Better. Not that there aren't a few that might very well be part of that same problem, but by and large, the governors are stepping up to this role to convene people around disagreeing better. We also, as Spencer said, understand the humility aspect. We know that governors can't cure this. There is no wand that governors have to fix civil society. We can convene, we can elevate the amazing grassroots work being done by nonprofits. We heard about some of it yesterday at our National Governors Association convening groups, some of which are operating on college campuses, including CSU, that are creating this space to bring people together for thoughtful dialogue. We can also try to move the culture that way with our role as governors. So I think this is the role that governors can play, a constructive role in this, but it takes students, it takes the academy, it takes culture, it takes a lot to kind of move this ship the right way towards a more constructive way to disagree.
Yeah. Governor Cox, examples in your home state of Utah.
Yeah, thank you. I love the example of all-day kindergarten. We're proud of our work in this space. We affectionately refer to it as the Utah way. I'm sure there's a Colorado way as well. But I didn't get a chance to kind of pioneer this, but I've learned from some amazing legislators and governors and others who have come before. I'll give you one example that happened a few years ago in a very controversial area. There were some big dust-ups happening across the country, Indiana, Arkansas. These were really controversial topics around LGBTQ protections and freedom of religion. And we had a group. I was lieutenant governor at the time. I wasn't engaged in the daily conversations, but around the fringes. But we brought members of the legislature together, members of the LGBTQ community together. We brought the religious community. They all came together. Basically, locked themselves in a room for like a month. I mean, and they hammered this out. And there were times when people got mad and walked out, and they always came back. There were apologies. There was trust that was built and formed. And they emerged at the end of the legislative session with what we affectionately refer to as the Grand Compromise. And what they did was, for the first time in our state, again, a very red state, maybe the reddest state in the nation, a supermajority Republican legislature, we were able to pass protections for the LGBTQ community in housing and employment for the first time in our state. This is about 6 or 7 years ago, and then also there were freedom of religion protections that were enhanced in our state. So it wasn't this, if you win, I lose. It wasn't the winner take all, zero sum kind of thinking. It was, how do we both find a win here? And they did. And I'll never forget that night. It was the last night of the legislative session. We had a signing of the bill in the rotunda. There were thousands of people there. Behind me, we had the high-level leadership from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the LGBTQ community embracing. We had the Eagle Forum, the most conservative group in the state, in Equality Utah, standing shoulder to shoulder, signing this legislation. That's a high I'm still chasing. I will be honest. It was one of those feelings where, like, wow, we did this. Like, this is how it can work and is supposed to work. And it was really a special time. There are several others I could share. We don't always get it right. Sometimes we get it wrong. But that was one one of the proudest days I've had in politics.
I want to add something that folks may not know about how legislatures work. So 90% of the bills that I've signed have been bipartisan. Working backward, how do we achieve that? In Congress, if you're a member of the minority party, and many of you know I represented this district, Northern Colorado, in Congress for about a decade. If you're in the minority party, you introduce bills, they never get a hearing, never get a vote, and never really become law. What we have in our Colorado legislature is every bill gets a vote in a committee. And can if they move it forward, they move it forward. If it doesn't, every legislator can introduce 5 bills. So one of the first things I did when I was elected to Congress, now it's, 15 years ago, I co-sponsored a bill with Doug Lamborn. This is a very conservative member of Congress from Colorado Springs that I don't agree with very much on. And we sponsored a similar reform for Congress where every bill would get a hearing and limiting the number of bills that a member can introduce to try to bring that same spirit to Congress. Needless to say, it didn't get anywhere. Party leadership on both sides opposed it. But I think having the right rules in place that even allow for that discussion to occur, because if you are, again, the minority in Congress, you have 0 bills before committee or even considered. You can't even have a forum to talk about your ideas. You can only express opposition to the other side's ideas, which is only part of the equation. We want to encourage people to bring forward their own ideas. That's something, a rule that predates me. I deserve no credit for it. This is something that we've had in the Colorado legislature for many decades.
Very cool.
Thank you for that. I think this next question relates to that, in that healthy conflict creates best conditions for compromises and better policy outcomes. And yet, on the other side of elections and policy debates, there's often winners and losers. So how, as governor, do you work with those losing sides after one of these debates to foster a healthy learning environment?
So, look, as much as I love that one example I gave where there were winners on both sides, very, very often this is a binary choice, right? So there are going to be winners and losers. Too often people hear this disagree better and think that means that I get to win all the time. It's like if I lost, well, you didn't disagree better because I lost. Well, no, that's not the point. I think something that Governor Polis just mentioned around process is really, really, really important. And it's something I've warned our legislature. In fact, I wrote a letter. I called it a non-veto letter. It was a threat to veto more bills in the future because I can see the erosion of process. And process matters because people need to feel like their voice is heard, even if they don't win. This is where you really get into trouble in a republic like ours. You can win or lose if you think it's fair. If you think it's not fair, then you can't stand the losing. Then we get angry, right? And that leads ultimately to violence. And I've seen a little bit of an erosion of process where we kind of skip the rules, where we make it harder for people to engage, where we change the rules during the session. And that's where we see where I see the most pushback. And so I think that's really, really important to make sure that people get their day. They get to have their bill heard, or they get a chance to speak to a bill. We don't rush it through and stack the deck to make it, to make it so it doesn't happen. It's hard. It was supposed to be hard. This was Madison's. This was his biggest fear, is that it would be easy and that we would fall into these factions and we would put party first and we would make it impossible for the minority to do anything, or conversely that the minority would rule and it would make it impossible for the majority to do things. He was so worried about that we put all of these checks and balances in place. Now that made maybe a little more sense back then. It's harder today because we expect everything instantaneously. You push a button and Amazon literally delivers the thing you want that day in many places in our country. You want to watch something, I get to watch it now. I don't have to wait for it to I don't have to go to I get to watch it today. We expect, I want this done in my government, it's going to happen today. Now, when I was running a business, Jared was the same, I'm sure. Like, I'd have a good idea and I could implement that like the next day. We just did that. Now I have good ideas, and if I'm lucky, like some weird version of what I wanted will get passed in a year or two, right? That's it. That's what we signed up for. It was much easier when we had a king and he got to just say what he did, but we decided that was really bad, and so we threw tea in the water, and then we shot a bunch of people and we fought the greatest superpower on earth to give us the ability to not do this stuff quickly, to make it hard, to make us bring people together. We can't be scared of that. If your idea is good enough that enough people will come together, then do it. And if it's not, then it fails, and we have to be able to accept that.
Governor Polis.
On what's the question?
I was going to say, I took us way off track there. So.
But if you'd like to opine on the King of England, I would be.
No. I mean, I'm not an attorney, and I don't get to spend too much time thinking about, that's the theoretical stuff. I'm more grounded in kind of solutions. But yesterday we did that for NGA. So what I didn't realize.
It's just a little shade. It's fine.
It's okay. Attorneys gotta have them.
Look, we're both the two of us are poli-sci grads and attorneys.
It's
like
true.
we're the
We're
worst people to be having this
No,
conversation.
So yesterday
But
through
we could have it
NGA
all
we
day.
did a little bit. It actually felt like taking a college course, really, some of the discussion. But what the scholars were telling us, I hadn't really think about this stuff before, but like they said, the reason that we had this separation of powers thing, which we have, which again is frustrating to us as governors because we can't get our agendas through. But the reason we have this nationally in our states everywhere is because it kind of is the way the Founding Fathers thought it would kind of force the kind of civic dialogue that's needed to have a healthy civil society and a healthy democracy. I never really thought too much about its underpinnings. Again, I'm operating more on the pragmatic level, but that makes sense, right? Like it should, and it doesn't function as well as it used to achieve this end. And they talked about things how both parties have become more isolated, and people identify as parties as almost as a matter of tribe now, and it's broken down a bit, and that's why we're talking about solutions. But at least institutionally, we're in a better position than if we just had, a one-body system where people got in and got their whole agenda in, and the other side got in and got their whole agenda in. It requires, it incentivizes consensus building. And again, I think our Colorado legislature does that even better by making sure all bills get voted on and heard. But Congress should, in its ideal form, also be able to achieve that through the bicameral process, the filibuster rules in the Senate, all of these institutional prerogatives that are designed to get people to talk and work through their differences.
Governors, we're going to transition to a couple of questions from our students. And so before we get to student questions, I'll ask you one more because I feel like the audience member who asked this is maybe worried about Thanksgiving, which is, what should you do if the conversation starts to derail or get heated?
Turn on football.
No,
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I think
Diversion
no. I
to
mean,
football.
it's not. Be curious and ask questions. I mean, why do you feel that way? Can you, what do you think about try to get them to understand your position? I mean, politics doesn't have to be, and it shouldn't be a toxic topic. Is it a hard topic to talk about in a constructive way? Sure. But I think that people should have meaningful dialogues. Disagree better. You could look at some of the techniques that data shows can work in this area, and NGA has many of them linked through the site and the nonprofits that do this work. And there's, and Spencer and I had a great script for this ad that we sat down and did. There's no reason that your MAGA uncle and the woke niece can't sit down together around the dinner table and have these same kinds of conversations that we need to have at a national level as well.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I don't know. I love talking about politics. Growing up in college, like that's what we did. I mean, we did other things too. I mean, but we would, we would debate and then we'd go have dinner together. We'd hang out, and not hate each other. And with my family, like this should be interesting. It should be fun sometimes. Obviously, we have problems in our country, but I think we need more participation, not less. But again, a healthy participation. We have a small group of people that are probably participating too much. That this is they're living and breathing it. Don't define yourself. Do not define yourself. Jared talked about identity. Historically, our political identity was way down the list of how we defined ourselves in this country. Growing up, we were Rams or Aggies. We were dads and moms, and we were Americans, Utahns, Coloradans, right? That's who we were. And then eventually you get down to, and I'm a Republican and a Democrat. If you're defining yourself, if that's how you think of yourself first, is that as a conservative or progressive or liberal or whatever, then you're doing something wrong, and it's really unhealthy. Politics has become a religion for far too many people, and nobody wants to hang out with you if that's all you want to talk about. I'm just saying, like, it is one thing that, yes, we should be able to engage and have these conversations, but if that's all you want to do everywhere you go, you're not going to have any friends.
Well, no, except
so
for other
stop
people
it.
who think exactly as you do.
And that's the
yeah,
problem.
yeah.
People are too lonely, and so they're seeking and they're finding their tribes. Like, if I don't have any friends, at least we can hate the same people together on Facebook, right? And that's dangerous.
Yes.
So, get real friends and talk about other things. Like, I mean, right now, the Broncos just won. I mean, you've got the best NBA team in the world. Talk about those.
The Rams
things.
are going to beat Nevada this weekend.
They're-
Go
they're
Rams.
abs-
That's right.
We can all cheer for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
We can all cheer for that. That's such great advice for our students, and for a lot of our students, the majority of them, this will be the first election that they're voting in. And so we're really focused on voter registration and that participation as they're coming into CSU. CSU is a gold seal university, meaning we have more than 75% of our students voting in the election, and we want to dial that up even further in the next year.
Love it.
So,
Yeah.
yep.
Madam President, I just have to say something really quickly, because a lot of you will be voting for the first time. This is not normal. I know this is all you've known since you turned like 12 or 13. You may think that this is what politics is. It is not. Do not accept that this is the way it has to be. We can do better, and we need your help.
Let me point to a moment. You remember the moment in the John McCain-Obama race, right, where John McCain, a class act, a statesman.
I think I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, there's a moment where he was in a town hall, and there was, I think, Tea Party. People were going, and somebody said Obama wasn't even born in this country. Went into this tirade, and McCain just sort of stopped it right there. Took a lot of courage, and he said, "Look, Barack Obama was born in Hawaii. He's a gentleman. I'm, a gentleman. I'm paraphrasing, of course. Yeah. We have disagreements on policy. That's what this election is about." And he took some heat for that, but that's the kind of statesmanship that has characterized this country for the most of our republic, and that's the kind that we're bemoaning the lack of in this day and age.
Yeah.
Nick DeSalvo is our student body president. He is here with some questions from the students. Nick, come on up.
Firstly, I want to thank the governors for being here. I had the privilege of spending the last 2 days with them, and by nature, I think I'm a little pessimistic. But these gentlemen give me hope for fixing our politics, and they're entrenched in fixing our politics, so thank you. This is a question that comes from me. As the head of the executive branch of your respective state governments, how do you find ways to work with other branches of government when you face disagreements?
You want to go?
Yeah, I mean, so we have legislative and judiciary, and I don't know what branches you have. So judiciary, obviously, you have to play by the rules, defend the legality of policies. I think our judicial system remains, hopefully, the pride of the world, of the country. It's independent. Obviously, the Supreme Court's become a bit more politicized than courts in general have. But generally speaking, I think it probably gets better marks than the other two branches of government. Executive and legislative have a very important and intricate relationship. So, I mean, we, as executives, have to work to forge coalitions to pass policy. And there's things we can implement on the administrative and executive side, and we certainly try to use that authority that we have. But really big change, and obviously fiscal matters and investment require that kind of consensus building and compromise that I think can at its best represent a healthy republic. And that's the work that we have in organizing. At the end of the day, our formal power is only to say yes or no. Veto or sign. I mean, that's the formal power is in many ways very small. We could stop things, but we can't make anything happen. So we take the informal power, the soapbox, the ability to convene, and try to build coalitions to enact an agenda that's consistent with what we ran on to make life better for the people of our state.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the answer. This has been one of the interesting things that I've had to learn as being governor. It's something I preach to my cabinet constantly, and that is I want you to over-communicate with the legislature. I want them to be part of the team. Yes, there is a tension between us, and there should be. That's by design. But I can't get anything accomplished without them, and they can't do very much without me. And so let's not see them as the enemy. Let's see them as our team. Let's work productively. This is, I think, a mistake that some governors make. We put out a budget proposal, but they have to come up with the actual budget. And I always say, like, look, let's be honest. There are like 10 things in this 2,000-line budget that I really care about. So why don't I use the other, 1,600 items to help them get what they care about? So let's find out. Let's over communicate. Let's involve them in decision making, and then they become our allies and help us. And this is true of any organization you're running, whether it's on college campus, whether you're running a business, a nonprofit, your church congregation. The more you include people and let them feel like they're part of your team, the better off you'll be.
Thank you. This last question comes from the Strayer Center Fellow, Anya Kaplan-Harnett. She's a fourth-year political science major. How do states involve students and young people in the decision-making process, and do you feel that involvement from students and young people is important?
Yeah, I mean, look, involvement is terrific from people of all ages, right? Whether they're seniors, whether they're students, whether they're not even of voting age. And so one of the things that in Denver, our capital is incredibly accessible, and we have high school kids come down and lobby legislators. We have college students come down informally and formally. Young people testify on bills all the time. So it's a very friendly process for involving young people. But the other side of that is how do we make sure that people of all ages, young people, let's say college students, know that their voice is valuable and how to participate, because you have to learn the rules of that game. And I think that's a role student government can play in helping to make sure that students here are able to have the forum to testify or write letters or know what to do on items that are important to them, and making sure that that knowledge is more universal.
Yeah, I love that idea. I was surprised when I became a legislator. I thought immediately my phone would be blowing up, my inbox would be full, and then there was nothing. Not nothing, but I would get like form emails, like thousands of them, and the least helpful way to advocate for anything. Like, I never looked at those. I didn't care about them at all. So if you don't want to take the time to actually tell me in your own words what you believe in, then I'm not going to take the time to read it. Right? That's not interesting to me. But what I found was, like, a single student could actually call me and make a huge difference on a bill. It's the same thing. Like, you know, we average in our legislative session 45 days, one of the shortest in the country. We pass about 500 bills every year in that 45-day session. It's a lot in a short amount of time. But here's the thing, just like the budget thing I said, most legislators really care about maybe 25, 30 of those bills. On the rest of them, like, sure, you know, I'm going to do it. But if one of their constituents feels really strongly about it and can make the case, you really can change somebody's mind. You know, I hate this kind of defeatist, pessimistic attitude that we have, that everything's baked and my voice doesn't matter at all. It matters more than you think, but you actually have to do the work and show up and understand the process. But you really can make a difference. And I've seen it. I've done it. I've changed my mind because a student called me and said, I really care about this. I'm like, why? And they told me, and I changed my vote. So it can happen.
As executives, we also have cabinet members. One of mine is here, Dr. Angie Piccioni, who used to be the state rep for this area many
Very
years
cool.
ago.
Nice.
For Fort Collins. And she is a constant presence on campuses across the state. So, I mean, you can get to, for instance, an executive through the members of the cabinet if they're out there, in the case of Angie, on campuses, in the case of, you know, our CDOT director meeting with traffic groups and drivers and constituency groups, in the case of, you know, our direct corrections official getting input from prison guards and others. So these are also ways that the types of communications that can empower people can work their way through to affect policy.
Thank you, gentlemen.
That's great. Thank you, Nick.
I became a
And
big Nick fan over the
Yes,
course of this
exactly.
week, too. Nick's great.
we are big Nick fans. Thanks, Nick. And I hope that all of our CSU students in the audience heard this advice and just how much your individual voices actually mean. And I have to give credit to Nick DeSalvo and these students on ASCSU this year. They're the most involved and active students in student government that I've seen in a long time, really taking their responsibilities seriously, as I think you've seen demonstrated over the last couple days. So thank you. They give me hope in our future and our future leadership going into politics, seeing the engagement of these students. So thank you. Yeah. So governors, I have a couple of more questions for you. And one is that, you know, we at Colorado State University are a land grant institution. We welcome students from all backgrounds, political persuasions here, where, to paraphrase you, I think it was, your MAGA uncle and your woke niece? Is that what you said?
I don't know who came up with that, but I think Spencer came up with that. But yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It fits.
It fits.
Could be your woke uncle and your MAGA niece, right? I mean, there's
It
no,
could
you know.
be, yes. We're here at CSU. They are here sitting in classrooms together, learning next to each other. So what advice do you have for students, or for me, as a president of a land-grant university, for how we foster this very valuable environment that our students and our faculty find themselves in, where they're here for a period of time with all of these different views around them, which I see as really a laboratory for democracy, one of the only places in the country where you've got that much diversity of viewpoints sitting next to each other. What advice do you have for us on how best to take advantage of that environment?
Well, a lot of advice. In fact, we just spent all day yesterday talking about this topic on college campuses. I'm very fearful. Now, let me add the caveat before so I don't have to get back to it later. I've been very impressed with CSU, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here. I do believe you have a culture of being willing to debate and share and free speech and all of those things that are so important to our democracy here. Sadly, that is not the case across the country. We have seen a significant decline in trust in higher ed across the country. In fact, over the past like 5 or 6 years, it's fallen from 57% down to about 36%, somewhere in there. That's a radically low number of Americans, their trust in the institution of higher ed. We've seen significant declines in free speech on campuses. Cancel culture has run rampant in too many areas, where if there's an idea that we disagree with or we're uncomfortable with, we won't let that idea even come onto campus. That is deeply problematic, and we can't allow that to happen. We've also become, through some self-selection for sure on the front end, but I think also on campus, we've become very left-leaning. Now, we always had left-leaning professors, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. The problem is when people don't feel like they can share their views, when we start self-censoring. And there's some new data out that shows that there's like 70% of students are self-censoring right now on campus. They don't feel comfortable expressing their views. That is not a healthy way to find truth. That is not a healthy way to get a degree, to learn. That's antithetical to the very purpose and existence of these institutions of higher learning. If we're not going to do that, then we shouldn't be doing anything. And so we have to do more to create that culture. And that means at the president's level, which is happening here, it means every single professor has to be very careful about the way they run their classrooms. They have to set out ground rules at the beginning to say, I value your opinion even if I disagree with that. And I'm not going to punish you, I'm not going to give you a worse grade if you say something that I disagree with in this class, because that's happening all across our country today. And then we need students to support each other, to defend those you disagree with. Right? That's really important, and that's something that is very, very American. This idea that we're going to defend the people that we hate, the people that we disagree with, because that's who we are as a country. I'm going to protect your right to say something that I disagree with. That's the most American thing we can do, and we need that spirit again on college campuses.
Governor Polis.
Well, look, I think that the little school down south in Boulder didn't get it right when they said we're just going to create like a conservative studies department, and then they wound up, as you know, hiring John Eastman, who supported overturning the election and is tied up with that. The answer is the ideology piece should not be part of the screening around professors, but what should be is, will you be supportive of vibrant classroom discussion regardless of your own personal feelings? And whether a professor or faculty or conservative, liberal, independent, whatever they are, what you value is somebody that makes sure that they don't make any student fearful about sharing their own perspective or voice in the classroom. And of course, the challenge to students is to also, through peer pressure, make sure that you avoid the peer pressure that prevents people from having the authentic kind of conversations that are very important in civil society.
I also just want to add, and we've seen this a lot lately, the idea of neutrality from leadership is really important, and I think that makes sense. We had a lot of college presidents who were eager to say things all of the time, and then we have Israel and Hamas, and suddenly they don't want to say anything, right? That's where you really get into trouble. Again, set a standard and say we're neutral. We're going to allow discussion on our campuses. We're not going to take a position, and then it gets much easier. Whatever the next thing is that you can't anticipate, you're going to be in a much better position when that comes your way.
As long as the position is also protecting the physical safety of all students.
Absolutely,
I mean,
that
position,
has to be a position. Is we are going to protect the physical safety regardless of your background. The anti-Semitism that we're seeing across the country right now is absolutely unacceptable.
So at CSU, we believe that every student who enters our doors should leave being prepared to be a good citizen of the United States. They're registered to vote, they're ready to engage, they're ready to understand the issues and participate in that. For the students who are specifically interested in someday doing your jobs, someday being governor, running for office, local office, state, federal office, do you have any specific advice for those students? Maybe we have a few here in our ASCSU who are actually interested in taking a path like you took.
Well, first, congratulations on 75% voter participation.
Yes.
That's
That's
got to
awesome.
rank you as one of the
Yeah.
top
It
in the
does,
country.
it does,
So
yeah.
that's terrific. I would, certainly encourage people, students who are here, who are watching, to not be turned off by the toxic dialogue you see today. It hasn't always been this way, and it won't always be this way. We really believe in a better and more constructive form of disagreeing better, of civil dialogue, and that's something that you can aspire to. And guess what? If you aspire to that and espouse those values, that'll only help you in your endeavors to serve and run for office. I think there's a great hunger for that out there, and not always in the circles, whether it's cable news or dark corners of the internet, where they have these isolated conversations on one side or the other, but among the vast majority of the American people. They want to see people working together, their leaders working together. They want to see thoughtful dialogue. Just like their leaders, people have strong opinions about things. But just as people try to work them out in their families, they think that their elected officials should also be able to work that out and find a better way forward for the country.
Thank you. Governor
Yeah,
Polis.
I just want to key on something that Jared said that I think is so powerful, and that is, I started off with pessimism. I'm going to show you a little bit of optimism here, and that is we know that about 70% of the country, some numbers that Dartmouth, some polling that they did, 70% of the country hates where our politics is right now. They refer to them as the exhausted majority. We used to call them silent majority. I like exhausted majority because we're tired. We're hungry for something different. Sadly, neither party at the national level is offering something different right now. There is a market failure happening out there. And somebody's going to figure this out at some point. We have over 70% of the country, 70% of Republicans, more than 70% of Republicans and more than 70% of Democrats don't want their front runner for office right now. Right? That's never happened before in our country's history. And yet, it seems like that's where we're headed. But the first party that figures this out, I think, is going to do very well. And so what I would say is, like don't be cynical. Cynicism is very toxic. This country is special. It really is different. Right? This grand experiment that we embarked on almost 250 years ago, this idea of self-governance, this idea that our rights do not come from government or from a king, but these rights come from on high. We're born with them. We are endowed with them. That all of us are created equal. And that we have these inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are radical ideas, and they are still radical today, and they are worth fighting for. They are worth preserving. And so be proud of your country, flaws and all. We can make it better, and we should, but know that this year of democracy, like this is it. This is the fight of our lives, and it was worth fighting and dying for 250 years ago, and it is still worth it today.
You know, one more market indicator of the fact that the people are not happy with the status quo is people are in hordes fleeing the Republican and Democratic Party.
That's right.
We have a plurality of unaffiliated in our state. It's going to be a majority very, very soon. In our state, they're fleeing the Republican Party faster than the Democratic Party. Maybe it's different in other states. But basically, both parties, more and more people are saying, I'm not part of that. I may be conservative, I may be liberal, but I am not comfortable calling myself a member of that tribe. And that's why unaffiliated ranks have been growing incredibly fast, both across the country and here in Colorado, where very soon it'll be a majority of voters.
Well, governors, we are just about out of time. I want to give you each a chance to say anything that you'd like to say at the end that maybe we haven't covered. This has been a really valuable, far-reaching discussion that I greatly appreciate. I'll call on Governor Cox first, and then out of respect for home field advantage here, Governor Polis can have the last word.
That's very fair. Look, more than anything right now, I mean, I've said most of what I think I needed to say today, but I do want to thank Governor Polis, my vice chair at the National Governors Association. This doesn't happen very often. It could, and it should happen more. We've been working on some immigration reform principles. We had another one of our fellow Republicans, Greg Gianforte from Montana, who was here. We've got 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats that have committed to working together on immigration reform. You know who cares about this in the media? Mostly no one. It's not nearly as entertaining to see a bunch of governors sit down and hammer out words and find agreement. It's much more entertaining when a senator threatens to fight a witness in Congress. That will go viral, right? And so I do want you to all think about the incentives in our country right now. The incentives to do things the wrong way, right? If you want to get on cable news, you have to say some pretty crazy stuff, and then you're much more likely to get on cable news. If you want to go viral on social media, you have to say some crazy stuff because the algorithms are designed. We love train wrecks and we love car wrecks, right? That's what we do. We always slow down going by the car wreck. It's human nature. The media, and I'm not just denigrating the media. There's good media out there for sure, but social media, many media members, to get our eyeballs, they're going to show the train wrecks. And so we end up with a Congress full of performers, people who aren't accomplishing anything, but they're performing, right? Because that's what we're incentivizing today. So if you want to change this, we all, as consumers, have to stop incentivizing that, right? We have to turn off cable news. We have to say we're not going to engage. And when you get in a room like this, you need to ask questions. This needs to be elevated. Instead of saying, what are you going to do to fight for me, say, what are you going to do to actually work with the other side to get something done? Ask that question, and then vote accordingly. One of the questions we got today from your student leaders was, when have you changed your mind? And how did you do that? Ask that question. That will tell you a lot about the people that we're voting for. And if you ever hear someone say, those people are trying to destroy our country, so you have to support me, those people, those are trigger words, right? When you hear those people, run away from whatever it is, because those people aren't as different as we think they are. Those people care about our country too, and we need to start working together if we're going to fix this.
Thank you. Governor Polis, some final remarks.
Well, not only, of course, the congratulations to CSU on 75% voter participation, but also on being, we believe, the first university in the country to model a formal course, Disagree Better, in line with the NGA's Governor's Initiative. So thank you for leading that work on that formal side. I think, hopefully you've heard from us, but I think this is something that you all understand kind of innately too. I mean, the solutions and the answers to these problems that we face are in your hands. In a way, it's very common sense. And it's some of the, what's that old thing, everything important you learned in kindergarten, right? I mean, it's just going back to those same basic rules of being kind and nice to people and respecting people. And just like that works in other areas of our lives, it should also be part of our values in the political arena. Doesn't mean there's not disagreements, doesn't mean people don't win and lose, doesn't mean elections aren't important and matter. All those things are incredibly true. But what's also important is we're all Americans, and we need to come together around rooting for the same side, and that's our country, to succeed. Not rooting for half of America to fail, but rooting for all of us to succeed together.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, I want to thank the governors for being here today. Thank you, Governor Cox, for coming to Colorado. Thank you, Governor Polis, for all your support for CSU, for higher ed in this state. This has been a really inspiring conversation, one that I know our students especially, but our entire university community have learned so much from. So thank you for that. I also noticed we've got some healthy competition among the sneakers on stage with you both.
Yeah, but
which
his are
I really
always better.
appreciate that
His
as
are
well.
always better. They,
Yeah.
I've got to get the new Utah flag on my shoes. at some
Oh,
point, so.
Spencer did an amazing upgrade to the Utah flag. They had this hideous old flag. I mean, it was the worst. Now there's like, we're all proud of our Colorado flag. Am I right? Like Colorado flag, like
Yeah.
It's a great flag.
It's
I
on
agree.
merch. Like
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
So the new Utah flag will also be very, very popular. I mean, I'm sure people are going to be very proud to wear it on their hats.
It will
and
be.
shirts
It's
and
really
everything else,
exciting
so,
because
yeah.
Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico have always had iconic flags. And as far as the four corners go, we had the traditional seal on a blue sheet, like about 25 other states, where you couldn't tell which flag it was unless you got really close. And so now we have a new addition to the four corners to make it much better. So you can Google it.
All right, that's great.
And that was probably one of the harder things you had to do as governor. Am I right?
It was one of the most controversial, and it's not over. There is a referendum to overturn the flag. So
gosh.
we'll see what happens.
Assuming there's no more shade that you need to
That's
throw
right.
at each other, I think we'll end it there on a positive note. Let's thank the governors for being at CSU
Thanks,
today.
everyone.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you so much, Madam President. You're amazing. Yeah. Thank you.